Welcome to the OBR streaming network. This is Things I Think I Know About the Cleveland Browns. My name is Brad Ward, and I am your host, solo host today on a Friday as training camp is just around the corner. I did a show last night on the network. Speaking of the network, hit like and subscribe while you're here. It just takes a second. Make sure that button's still working for everybody. Make that algorithm work for us and do all the things down below. Hit that button, notification bell so you know every time we go live. But this is Things I Think I Know About the Browns. Did a show last night with Casey, as usual, all lies on Cleveland, and I got some good feedback from it. You guys can always reach out to me via email, bward@theobr.com if you have questions and stuff. But I appreciate when some of you do reach out after shows because it does just create more content that we can talk about. But some good topics last night that we discussed and kind of led into today. But a couple things off the top. We have our tight end rankings from ESPN, execs, coaches, and scouts, which are the best rankings, right? Like if you're going to do rankings, we don't care less about what, talking heads, have to say or a one-off article. Now, certainly credence to can be led to whoever, given to whoever writes those articles, and of course they're interesting and whatnot. But when we're talking about rankings and you're involving the coaches, the execs, players, they seem to carry a little more value. Tight end rankings, 1 through 10. Brock Bowers at 1, George Kittle 2, Sam Laporta 3, Trey McBride 4, Travis Kelce 5 at age 35. He was number 1 last year. Mark Andrews at 6. I don't know about that one. Last year's ranking 3. TJ Hawkinson at 7. Isaiah Likely 8. Dallas Goedert 9. David Njoku comes in 10. Now, he was unranked last year. Pardon me. He was ranked 6th last year. His lowest ranking was unranked. He's 28 years old. In the 2024 season, Njoku's yards per catch dipped from 10.9 to 7.9. He posted a respectable 64 catches, 5 touchdowns while playing in one of the league's worst offenses. He figured it out, quote unquote, a NFL personnel evaluator said. Before, he was just an athlete with physical tools, but he's evolved into a pro tight end who had more nuance to his game as a route runner and more coverage awareness. Honorable mentions: Dalton Kincaid, Pat Freiermuth, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram, Cole Kmet, Jake Ferguson, and Jonnu Smith. Now, 10, I would push back on him being behind Isaiah Likely. Likely is a very talented player, but I think Njoku's better. I would push back on an aging Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is very good, but I think that certainly the Browns offense did him no favors in this ranking, right? Let's be real. The Browns offense last year did him no favors. He was 6th the year before. But I have him up there with, they want to put Kelce on this list at 5. Sure. I get it. He does a lot of stuff, but his production has fallen off. Some of these guys are getting a lot older, and Njoku's still 28. I fully expect the Browns, to answer your question right now, I fully expect the Browns to sign him to an extension and go forward with him and Fannin into the future. So I thought he got robbed a little bit at 10th there. He could be up there with the Trey McBrides of the world. Is it fair based on production? Probably. His offense has to do him more favors than they did last year because that just wasn't enough to get, as far as a ranking like this. It's hard to put a guy at the top when your offense was as bad as the Browns was last year. But what the exec said is correct. He's taken his athleticism. He's figured out the nuance in running routes, out leveraging guys, and blocking, and become a supremely valuable player. And I think the Browns are crazy, despite seeing every day another trade rumor involving Njoku. I don't think the Browns have any intention of dealing him away. And I think that he will receive a lucrative deal to stay here in Cleveland into the future. He is one of those guys that can be part of this thing moving forward at 28, still in his prime years at tight end. So his best play came under Joe Flacco. Just saying. Just worth noting. All right, so you're watching Things I Think I Know. The other news that kind of came out, and this stuff will lead into some of my talking points today. Not going to be a super long show. We're going to keep it short and sweet today, but some things I wanted to hit on. Jerry Jeudy. Congratulations to Jerry Jeudy. Gets in the top 100 players in the NFL, which is actually a very prestigious honor. Ranked 82nd. And after his breakout year last year with the Browns in that bad offense, think of what he could have done had the first 8 weeks not been what they had been, right? So projecting some of that forward, I mean, sky's the limit for Jerry, right? Let's hope that they can put enough around him and have, I mean, anything is going to be better than what Watson provided for 8 weeks last year. So this thing should be moving in the right direction offensively. Even if it's not a world-beating offense, it should be moving in the right direction, right? Like, we've pivoted off of that problem. It's in our rearview mirror, and they're going forward. So both those guys getting a little kudos, Njoku and a much deserved for Jerry Jeudy. It's been a rough go for him since he first came into the league. High expectations, first round pick. Was unable to live up to those expectations in Denver, but fully, it's about where you are. He felt appreciated here. Came on strong last year and looked dynamite at times. And I think one of the things, and I talked about, you've heard me talk about this before probably, but one of the things I was most impressed with Jerry was he never was really known as like a big contested catch guy. Like, he's a separator, right? And he's a technician as a route runner. And those are the kind of guys the Browns like. But in the snow game with Pittsburgh and in some of the Denver game even, he made some incredible high point catches in traffic that I didn't know were necessarily in Jerry Jeudy's bag. And so kudos to him. 82nd overall player in the NFL. That's terrific. That is what it is at 10th on the tight end list there. All right. I got this question in my email. Thank you again, those of you reaching out. If it's not Luke Floria and Cade McDonald, so obviously somebody watched the React. This week there was Lance Reisland, does a great job, film stuff over at Cleveland.com. had a breakdown on Luke Floria and how he could be the next Julian Edelman. And, that stuff gets, taken out of context and whatever. I don't think he was calling him the next Julian Edelman. He's just kind of comparing like what he does. And to kind of steal from what he said, he just talked about he can be a guy that can play like a true slot that can get you easy yardage, right? Find the soft spots and zones. He's a very intelligent player. He gets to his spots. He's got some real twitch to him and can get open and sit down in zones and be a quarterback's option for easy yardage in an offense, something the Browns definitely need. So, and Pete pushed back saying that, on Tuesday night on the React that Cade McDonald is more of the body type and, in his opinion, the better Julian Edelman-esque option of the two, I guess, small white wide receivers that the Browns have in camp that kind of fit that slot mold. So the question was, if it's not Luke Floria or Cade McDonald, who is it at slot? And who is your wide receiver depth chart? Which is a loaded question and a good question and fair. We've talked about the wide receiver to death, but let's just do it real quick. So we know Jerry Jeudy. We know Cedric Tillman. We expect and hope that Tillman has that breakout year. And I think we kind of talked about in recent weeks that maybe this offense doesn't look like a lot of wide receivers on the field all the time and is more of, as Casey described, Fannin, he can be kind of a power slot at times, kind of filling that Isaiah Likely role for the Browns, and allowing them to still have mismatches in the pass game, but without having to have 3-4 wide receivers on the field with him and Njoku out there, which I think is fair. And I think from the glimpses I've seen them, the Browns in minicamp and stuff, with two backs on the field at times. So I think that that's another way that they would like to weaponize their offense, whether it be Ford and Judkins or Judkins and Sampson, or the other combination, right? Sampson and Ford. So it's the utilization of bigger personnel, 21 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, I think is something we all kind of see coming for this offense, which makes you wonder about this wide receiver room. So Jeudy, Tillman, I think Jamari Thrash makes this team. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he shows out and becomes the guy that the Browns hope that he is and that they need him to be. I'm weary at this point on Thrash. David Bell comes back at some point. I don't know what the timeline there is. He's certainly in the mix. Mike Woods is in the mix. And then you've got your undrafted rookies, your McDonald, your Keyshawn Johnson, and your Luke Floria. If I had to guess, right, and obviously the name that nobody wants to talk about, but I keep talking, is Deontay Johnson. If I had to guess, I would say it's Jeudy, Tillman, Deontay Johnson. I think he at least starts the year on the team. Jamari Thrash. It's tough after that, isn't it? It's very tough after that. I think if David Bell's healthy, he's my wide receiver 5, and then just because I know how much they like him, right? They do like him a lot. So if he can get healthy, I think he's in the mix there to be 5. And if they're going to carry 6, and they may not, they may only carry 5 if they're going to carry 4 quarterbacks, which is still to be determined. But yeah, that David Bell, Mike Woods, and then the 3 UDFAs that fill the 5th or the 5th and 6th spot, I would like to see come from off this roster. Browns have the 2nd highest waiver claim. We've talked about the teams from that have an abundance of talent. I saw today more stuff out of Buffalo on who's their cut candidate wide receiver? Curtis Samuel. Who I would be very interested. I've always been a big fan of Curtis Samuel. In that what he could potentially provide for an NFL team. So I would have interest there. I have interest in Dobbs or anybody really that Green Bay is looking to pass on. I have interest in Alec Pierce or anybody that Indy is looking to move on from on the back end of their wide receiver room. And probably one of the even more intriguing areas is New England, right? Like Javon Baker was a later round pick, a guy that was high on coming out of the draft. Think he would fit this room well. He's athletic. He's strong. They just have a wealth of wide receiver talent in New England, and too much of it that they're not going to be able to carry it all. So with the 2nd waiver claim, how do you use it if you're the Browns? I think there's a couple different ways. I think wide receiver is certainly one of those options. Like, you're asking me my depth chart. It's Jeudy, it's Tillman, it's Johnson, it's Thrash, and it's in best case scenario, maybe one of these guys, maybe a Cade McDonald or a Flourier, whoever wins that battle, and or maybe a David Bell if he's healthy, and then somebody from another roster. I just think that there are better options on other rosters right now at wide receiver. We are not strong depth after Tillman. And Tillman is still a question mark, but, and Johnson is a question mark, and Thrash is a question. There's just so many question marks that if you could bring in anybody else from any other team to kind of bolster this room, I would do it. But they're going to figure it out because it's going to be a run-heavy team. And as we talked about, they're going to use Fannin as a weapon, which brings me to the waivers claim. Back to the waivers claim. Now, there's 2 ways to go around, about adding to this roster. You like somebody enough on somebody else's 90-man roster as it gets cut down that you beat the claim waivers process and trade a late round draft pick for one of these guys, which is what teams are hoping for when they hang on to guys till the end, right? Or you use that 2nd overall waivers claim, which is valuable to grab somebody that qualifies for waivers. Now, there will be guys cut that don't even qualify for waivers. They'll go straight to free agency. Those are your veterans, your guys out of their rookie deals, right? They go straight to free agency, and that's a whole nother ball game. So if it's a guy like that, then you probably are trying to potentially use a late round draft pick if you really love him and think he can add to your roster. As we get closer to cut downs and further into training camp and this roster takes shape more. Tight end is another position I'm not sure they're done at. We've talked about this a couple times this week, but well, not this week. Jack talked about it, that he thought when he was on, he thought they would bring back Jordan Akins because with Whitebeard, Charlie Whitehurst, is that his name? So you used to call him Whitebeard. I think it's Whitehurst. Blake Whitehurst. I'm calling Whiteheart. I'm way off. Charlie Whitehurst. Who's that? That's somebody. Blake Whiteheart. Brendan Bates. And then they brought in Sal Cannella, who is played in the UFL. But Whiteheart is clearly their third guy right now. At least it feels like, right? And what you're going to do with Whitebeard becomes question. I mean, if Njoku misses the game and it's Fannin and Whitebeard, that's a different, a huge lot of what you want to do offensively, mismatch wise, and a lot of what you do playbook wise goes out the window. If it's Fannin that misses a game, can Whitebeard come in and do what Fannin does? No, he can't really do what either guy does, right? Where Akins, to Jack Duffin's point, he's no Njoku, but he can do what Njoku does, right? Like, he can run routes, he can block sufficiently enough to not have to throw out the playbook on your 12 and 13 personnel stuff when there's an injury. To me, this makes common sense. He's out there on the market. Maybe he's waiting. But bringing Akins back, I just think that feels like an inevitable at this point. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe they like Whitebeard enough that they're just like, forget it. Akins is 33. We'd rather play our young players. We've seen this, right? We've seen this with Okoronkwo getting cut. We've seen their decision to not go after like a starting caliber veteran safety and let Ronnie Hickman try to grab that job. So they are trying to get younger at spots. So maybe this is an effort to do that. But I don't know if that's how you do it. I don't know if Whitebeard is the guy that you plant your flag on and say, we're going to get younger at tight end with Whitebeard here. Where Akins is just sitting out there, he knows the offense and can provide you not at the same level, but some of what Fannin does and some of what Njoku does, so that if there is an injury, you're not totally screwed on offense. Peyton Hendershot, Hayden Hurst, Nick Van Nett, another former Brown, Geoff Swaim, McCole Pruitt is interesting. CJ Uzama is interesting. Mercedes Lewis and Gerald Everett. Mercedes Lewis plays 19 years in the league. Holy crap. 41 years old. Yeah, you're not going down that road, I don't think, but Tyler Davis is a 28-year-old 5-year vet on the market. Anthony Fursker is 30. Dalton Keene is 26, played with the Texans last year. None of these guys are young, super young, that are names that we recognize, right? Hurst, Vanette, Pruitt, and Uzoma. And Akins are the guys that jump out. Akins just seems to make so much sense, right? So I don't think that the Browns roster is necessarily done at tight end. I think we might see a shuffling of the deck there. I think they'll give these guys a shot. Akins is 33, doesn't necessarily need to be in camp right now. He could probably get here a couple weeks ahead of time and fill that third role. So let's keep an eye on that, right? Like that's an area to keep an eye on. The other area, which I think, strangely enough, I think that you could see the Browns potentially try to add, and they've done this in the past. Is corner, and the reason just why is because when we talked about why corner is so tricky for this team this year, you've got Emerson, Newsome, both in contract years. Both you would like to think starting caliber players. You've got Cam Mitchell, you've got Miles Harden, and you've got a guy named Nick Needham in the nickel. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're like not overwhelmed by Needham, or when you think of Cam Mitchell, he does a little bit of inside-outside versatility, but not like overwhelming amounts of like, you don't feel great with him lining up outside when he's forced into it. So like a couple years ago, they snatched a UDFA named Khalif Halasi from off Kansas City's practice squad, right? And he played here for a couple years as a third outside corner. I think that's probably in the realm, right, this year of them doing work on guys that they liked coming out in the draft, younger players that get cut or get tried to push through to a team's practice squad. I think that they could claim another veteran corner, somebody with length that they could feel like they can maybe groom into a depth piece on the outside, because ultimately after this year, what do you have at corner on the outside, outside of Denzel Ward, right? So we saw him do it with Halasi. They never really replaced him. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, if there's a guy they like, and chances are this is one of the stronger areas that Andrew Berry has done well in drafting, and UDFAs is in the secondary. And so trading a 7th round pick or using the waiver claim on somebody, I think you're looking at wide receiver would be like priority one for me. Tight end maybe, but I think you can go the Akins route. Makes a ton of sense to me. And I think that at corner, what they did with Halasi a couple years ago, practice squad claim, they liked his length, they liked him ahead, through the draft process, scooped him up when he landed on Kansas City's practice squad, brought him in, He played 2 years as a depth piece for the Browns, right? So, um, with Emerson and Newsome in contract years both, I think it would be kind of crazy to not have any other outside corner depth on this team, right? And I'm not willing to call Cam Mitchell that versatile yet. Like, he can do it for a short amount of time, but I don't see them asking Cam Mitchell to cover on the outside for an entire game. If they, they'll be fine depth-wise this year because they just move Newsome out. If Emerson's hurt or Ward is hurt, Newsome just kicks outside and plays the outside, and that works. But I find it hard to envision a scenario where both Emerson and Newsome are here in 2026. So if they like somebody like they like Talasi, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring somebody in now, and start to kind of groom them into what you want them to be. Even if they don't pan out or they don't work out and you end up having to spend like a 3rd-round draft pick on a corner next year to replace somebody, that's fine. But the waiver claim, the cut down process now being all at once, you know what I mean? Teams don't do it all at once. They will cut guys slowly, get down to their 53, but the all at once madness of teams going from like 75 to 90, somewhere in that number, to 53, making 1,000 players available at once is wild, right? And in the past, we've seen the Browns grab a guy or two in these scenarios. And I think when you're looking at wide receiver and corner and maybe even tight end, if they like somebody there, but I do think that Akins as a 3rd tight end and not your 2nd tight end makes a lot more sense as you move forward, right? Like him as Fannin, the replacement to potentially Fannin and Njoku, makes a ton more sense than the role that he's been playing in the past here. So those are some of the things that were top of mind. So just to recap, wide receiver depth chart: Jeudy, Tillman, Deontay Johnson for now, Jamari Thrash, David Bell health ? Mike Woods. I know what Mike Woods is. I don't think if he makes this team, I'll be a little bit like side-eyeing that. Like, what? You couldn't find somebody better or younger out there and cut downs, or somebody on one of these rosters that was, working from a position of power where that their 6th wide receiver is better than our, much better than Woods or Bell, or more proven than Thrash. Somebody with some upside that you feel like could do a good job at the back end of this receiver room. I think you try to bring some talent in here any way you can at that position at this point. I don't think it'll hurt them that much this year because they think that what they want to do is so heavy personnel based and trying to create mismatches with, 2 tight ends on the field or 2 backs on the field and then motioning to spread stuff. And it's going to be a lot of featuring Jeudy and Tillman and Thrash, or hopefully Deontay Johnson if he can keep his head on straight, right? And I think that's kind of what you're trending towards. But injuries happen. You want to take a shot at Javon Baker seems to me, he's like that perfect example of this, right? Like, he was a later round pick. Teams liked him. He's athletic. He's bigger. He's not so big of a name that you're going to have to trade for him. Probably could get cut very easily from New England. That would be like the perfect usage for me of that second waiver wire position that you have. And then Akins, we talked about why that makes more sense at this point, but there's no rush on that. Just a thought going into camp. And then cornerback. Not a lot of guys, you can look at, like, I still have high hopes for Miles Harden. I still hope he turns into something. I still have high hopes for Cam Mitchell. But watching the Browns and what they've done in the past and how Andrew Berry has handled this position in the past just makes me feel like they're not done there when it comes to cut downs. Like, especially like looking at if they can find a longer outside corner. Like, you've got Harden and you've got Mitchell to kind of battle that out. You've got Nick Needham there in camp too, who has been around a few teams and will put forth a good effort and position himself well if he can. But I'm sure Andrew Berry's got a little short list of names, whether they're first year, second year guys, or even UDFAs that he liked this year that, if this guy gets cut, or, they're going to try to, sign him back to cut him and sign him back to their practice squad. Might be able to use him on our roster, or maybe you flip a 7th round for him, or a 6th if you really love him. So wanted to get those thoughts off my chest today on things I think I know. We hit on some of that last night, but some follow-up questions on the waiver claims process. So waiver claims, when cut downs happen at the end of training camp, will be for guys that are on a rookie deal or within that rookie deal range, right? And then guys that are outside of that, or vested, I guess, players or whatever they call it, they are outside of that first contract, they go to free agency. So they can go catch on with any team after they're cut. They can sign onto a practice squad or whatever. So some guys have to clear waivers, some guys don't, depending on where they are in their career. So that's something to keep an eye on. Wide receiver, tight end, cornerback, all feel like natural places where the Browns aren't done. And opportunistically could add and get better. And I hope they do. This has been another edition of Things I Think I Know on the OBR streaming network. My name is Brad Ward. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful, safe weekend out there. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button as we try to push towards 10,000 subscribers. It only takes a second, and it helps us out so much. So I thank you in advance for doing that. And have a wonderful weekend with friends, family. Enjoy it now. Camp will be here soon enough. Football will be here soon enough. Enjoy the good weather. My name is Brad Ward. For everybody over at the OBR, we are